Yeah, this question's for Dex, I guess. A lot of times, well, you said that in your project, you know, it was an evolutionary process. You didn't know what you didn't know, and you had to allow the process to evolve. I'm going to question your project methodology then. If that's the case, why did you not consider rapid prototyping or a more agile methodology in order to get something out there to the team and let them look at it and then refine it?
That's a good question, and I think one of the reasons we were all excited to build a greenfield plant, and indeed it's a great opportunity, but we didn't have a plant team. We didn't really know. We didn't have people to go talk to, and we didn't even really know what the scope of what we were trying to bite off. We knew that we wanted to put together a dashboard concept, but we didn't really know what that meant to the people that were going to be running the plant because we didn't have them to talk to. So I guess part of it was kind of stepping up with a little, suffering a little bit of a lack of knowledge of what we were trying to get to in the end. And I guess the second piece of that was a rapid startup. We broke ground, and 14 months later we were producing product, and that really didn't leave us with a whole lot of time to go through a long and drawn out process. So that's part of the reason why we kind of did our best guess at what they were going to need. We talked to the production people we could at other plants, did our best guess at what they were going to need when the plant management team came on site. That's when we showed them what we had, and we kind of found out that we'd missed the mark a little bit. We were suffering a little bit from not having them involved up front, but I hear what you're saying. There's, especially in an organization that's running and has continuous production, it's a little easier, I think, to deploy some of those other tools.
Well, I see another question right here. Oh, okay, right there. Go ahead.
I'm Ranga Seshadri from Husky Energy. My question is, when you are creating those reports or those dashboards and others, are you also empowering the end users, some advanced end users? These days everyone knows how to work with these systems. Or if they have to create additional ones, should they go through the IT department to make those additional reports or dashboards?
So you're asking how you empower people to make additional dashboards and that type of thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, in our case, because of the nature of the software we started with, it was always oriented toward end users. And so the IT investment is mostly infrastructure, and so we decided to leave it that way and to set it up so that the user group itself could create things like dashboards. The complicated part is data integration, and that's where IT has to come in, and you've got a lot of infrastructure issues. The downstream part, if you get the data integration right, is people can see the data that's available. They know which ones they want to look at, and you can make it a lot easier for them to point at the data, put it on a dashboard, and see how it works. And so in our case, we were able to do that. And we had some advantages with Lloyd's team in that they had a pretty good level of expertise for helping us do that.
Yeah, we want people to play, so we expect them to learn how to do that through the process. And I have a group of people that spend most of their time enabling that process for them. Oh, and we also do a great deal of training even before the tool shows up in their shop.
And actually, I'm going to say one further thing. I think that's really important because the past has been big systems get dropped in and nobody gets to change them without a huge reinvestment and a long process. If you don't enable users to get at the data and work with their own needs, then your system's not going to adapt to what people really need, and you won't get the buy-in.
In our particular instance, when we were able to create the unified data model, that data model then was available to all users. So once you had that data model, you could then create your own ad hoc reports, drag and drop, those type of capabilities.
I guess the only, in my mind, the only caveat to that is it is important to give the users tools they can mine their own data, but it also falls clearly under the heading of if you give them enough rope, they might hang themselves too. So, and I don't mean to throw a wet blanket on the idea of a user creating their own report, but I'm not sure the tools are quite there yet. If you've got enough different disparate data sources, sometimes it's a little tough for them to know where to go to get the data. And so that's when they call in people like this, or your IT people to try to help out with that.
Right, but once the information is in that data model, then it is accessible. So if there's other data sources, then obviously that takes a little bit more capabilities to make that happen.
Both presentations were excellent, by the way. I've been working for last year on a project which I called the Plant Management System. No one liked the acronym. Today I realized that what we were doing is enterprise manufacturing intelligence. And I remember when I started reading through this a couple of weeks ago. Great, it's got a title. Connecting all the disparate sources for the data, our QA, our sampling, and some of the inventory, that's been easy to do. We've started running into, where we see the challenge with what we've been trying to do, which is exactly what you guys have done, is when we start to connect to ERP systems, the financially sensitive systems in our system. And what we found here is that we're trying to work through that from the business who's implementing these systems with IT to support it, who actually owns the system. And what I'm wondering from both panelists, presenters, is how your organization has divided that, because we're finding now that we're running into IT general controls, separation of duties, because SOX compliance, internal audit wants to make sure that we have change control, access control on who's using the data, who's seeing the data, and data integrity.
Okay, I'll make a confession on my part. Dex said something very interesting. He said involve IT up front. I have a note here that says oops. Where are you out there, folks? Because I know you're there. We didn't. We got the business excited first and then created pull. Now, the financial database that you're talking about, that is not a wall we've tried to crash through yet. And I recognize the significant barrier that might be in place there. However, we're not creating a cloud. We're not moving data anywhere. What we're doing is taking one portion of the Northwest Analytics data and installing it, attaching it to our databases, and then taking another section of computer code and then tying them all together. And if the corporate suite gets interested enough in what we're doing across our supply chain and our manufacturing capabilities, then my hope is that they will see the value in tying the financials to it as well. I do have a team that gets credit for significantly solved problems, and they don't work on a problem that is not worth $10 million from the get-go. So I understand what you're saying, and I'm just hoping that that will resolve itself at some point.
We have a lot of people came to us saying they needed something that they didn't know the three-letter acronym for, and that was probably the first one we said, well, we just discovered it ourselves. It's called EMI, by the way. Most of the people we're working with are still working just with plant level and production data, and they know that next step is out there. In our case, we don't create a separate data store, so there's no data security issues in the sense of the data getting out of the financial side and being stored somewhere else. But when you're dealing with something like SAP, so we do direct queries all the time. We're going after the data where it's stored. There isn't a separate database for this. For them, it involves abstracting the data or mirroring it out of something like SAP into a controlled database that only has certain things in it. So we're not launching direct queries through security into the financial database. We're dealing with a replicated database with just limited information in it, and it did vastly simplify the controls issues and things like that, and it made IT and finance a lot happier because they had that throttle point, and we can't modify the data, we can't pull it away. So it's something like that, is just get the data that's needed, put it somewhere else where it's easier to manage, and don't allow any of these systems direct access to this sensitive data.
I would share a quick experience in this area, and I I guess I come from a little more of a touchy-feely solution on it from a human standpoint. If you look at the IT people and the technical PLC people, they don't have opposing ideals, but they think they do. And I've worked really hard at different levels of the organization trying to sell that idea and preach that gospel. When I arrived at a plant to manage the IT group and industrial engineering, one of the things the plant manager took me aside and said, I'm kind of giving you a blank slate here. If it means people changes or organizational changes or whatever, you just come back to me and tell me what you think you need, because he perceived that there were some real issues between IT and process control. And I kind of observed and came back to him 3 months later and said, you know what, there's nothing wrong with the people. You've got some of the best people in the company. They're just not working together very well. And I suggested to him that he allow me to bring the process control people under my umbrella as well. And so that move there at the plant really helped things out. And later on, in a couple of years down the road, the maintenance group wanted to pull them back, and that was okay. We had already gone through that sort of little honeymoon over fighting period, and we'd worked through those issues. So I just use that experience to illustrate that it's an ongoing issue. It's a relationship that you have to, and a culture that you have to understand both sides of it and try to bring those people together. If you don't manage them both or either one of them even, get with the people that do and bring them together. And as you talk about what your goals are, you're going to find out that they're not opposing ideals. They're very complementary.
One final comment. I was reminded of this when Dex was speaking. He's talking about lessons from his project, and I learn this lesson constantly, but you've got a vision that you want to achieve. Don't get stuck in the details. There will be lots of reasons not to go do things, so do the things that you can achieve. And then all of a sudden I found that people turn around and go, wow, that's pretty cool. Maybe we should buy into that process. And so I try not to get involved in the details. I've been told no a lot, but it hasn't stopped us yet. So
are there any other questions? Okay, we have one more.
Brad Hound from ExxonMobil. Two great talks. Really enjoyed hearing what you guys are up to. Question primarily with Dow. How do you decide, or how do you make use of the package versus your internal IP, particularly in the way of the analytics? Are you just configuring information that comes with the package? Or are you developing methods of displaying data?
Okay, in some cases we have internally developed methods for displaying data for very specific reasons, and I obviously can't talk about that. We are taking some of the capability out of the tools that Northwest Analytics makes available to us. I will tell you a significant pushback in this, quite frankly, lately is all the wonderful engineers at Dow that swear to me they can make Excel do a better job. And I love Excel, don't get me wrong. The reality of it is every time we upgrade to our next version of Excel, all these tools break and we can't use them, and in some cases plants are run on these. So again, I believe that we can, if we can't get what we're looking for, our collaboration with Northwest Analytics usually can deliver a solution. And just today, Lewis was looking at some progress on our implementation in this one business, and he was very impressed with what one of my brilliant programmers did to his program, which we are also very proud of as well. And that's the nature of what they provided to us. We can use our own in-house intelligence, but my only rule is they cannot change something so drastically that Northwest Analytics can't come back in and help fix it.
I will say ours is all configurable off the shelf. There's no programming involved as such, so they can't get themselves in too much trouble. But they can do things that we didn't know you could do, which they managed in this case quite well.
I guess a quick comment that I would make there. a lot of the decision-making process that we go through, of course, as with any organization, has a lot to do with what your standards are. You know, you have to follow company standards and so forth. But in this case, we didn't really have one. And a big part of the decision-making process, quite frankly, had to do with support. And I really focus on that a lot because one of the problems that we're trying to solve in the plants is so many homegrown things. Joe Schmo retires and somebody else has to pick it up. So I wanted to line up with people that have excellent support structures. I don't know the extent you've worked with Rockwell, but they have an excellent support structure. We've often kidded that at our plants when we have a problem and we make it known you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a Rockwell guy that's tripping all over the next Rockwell guy to help you out, and that really is true. And with Stone, the reason why we sided up with them was a lot of the same things. We looked at what they'd done in the industry and felt like they were here for the long term to support us, so that had a lot to do with why we picked who we did.
Okay, I had someone whispering in my ear I should comment why we picked Northwest Analytics. To be very honest with you, 10 years ago I got into a race with internally derived dashboards that they were programming in the various program languages, and they were not delivering what I needed in the plants, and so I sent some people out to a wide stream of purveyors. We evaluated all the tools. None of them met my standard either, but I was pretty picky, but we did go back to the one that was closest and said, okay, would you work with us to give us what we really want? And can you do it faster than our I won't say IT people because it's a different organization, but can you do it faster than the people that are programming away? And the race was on. And within 6 months, we had our first beta test of what we were looking for. 2 years later, one of my friends in IT called me up and said, we've got our program ready. But by then, we had completely committed because of that relationship. So we did an evaluation, and you need to go do that as well. And we found what we were looking for with Northwest Analytics.
I think we got time for one more question.
Hi, I'm Fred Proctor from NIST. I've got a question about how you select your KPIs. And how do you know which ones are going to be useful, and how do you avoid the tendency to teach to the test where the operators will just tweak the knobs to make the needle move, and do you periodically validate them and reassess them to make sure they're doing what you want them to do?
Oh, this is my sweet spot. Multivariate analysis of the data looks for the correlations, and then when people are playing with the data, it immediately becomes apparent. And I didn't even plan that the first time we installed a model in one of our LIMS systems in the plants, because we were just looking at the data as it came in, each batch of data versus the model. But we noticed that after we'd fixed all the problems in the plant, we still had a 4% out of model when everything else was fine, and we finally discovered that they were pencil whipping. If there were 6 things to measure, they'd measure 3. If they looked fine, they'd write the number in. And so multivariate analysis is one example. There are lots of others, but I just happened to catch people at it, and we very quietly explained that they wouldn't do it again, and it hasn't happened. Key process indicators, to me, I've got a problem with them because I don't know whether they correlate to fitness for use, okay? And so you said FDA, right? NIST, okay, great, NIST. Don't jump on him, but to be very honest with you, I would love to go to our food and pharma people and say, let's get rid of the specification and let's do process capabilities. I know they're going to come. I know FDA is going to come ask about that someday, because I know my chemometricians talk to other people's chemometricians. But it's an advanced form of computational analysis, and unfortunately, universities are not producing these people in great quantities. So that's a problem.
And one of my favorite topics too, because I think there's a real problem with KPIs, and why does it exist? Was it designed from the top down, which they typically are? Are the underlying components actually reliable? So you got a number that you're getting that's based on 5 other things coming out of the process. Any number of those could actually not be stable. So the first thing to do is to not use composite, go directly to the actual data itself, and make sure that you've got data that reflects the process and that it's stable and predictable. I mean, just a simple SVC chart will tell you that. If you've got stable, predictable numbers, and then you can start building up to KPIs, sometimes to reduce the number of things you look at, sometimes to get the composite result. Lloyd was talking about true multivariate modeling, which is a statistical technique that when you're doing it, there's a lot of value there. But if you're just taking like a yield calculation, that's still a model. It's still a mathematical model, and it is subject to all sorts of problems. And I always think that getting the raw data figured out, the basic data figured out first, and then start thinking about composites is always a better first step.
That is a really great question, and it's one with which we are grappling as well. I ended up going to the executive management group, and after I had tried to come up with a core set of reports, and that's just what we ended up with coming out of them for direction to me. Let's see if we can't come up with a core set that we would take to all plants, and each plant's going to vary in the detailed reports that they want. So that's a process that we're kind of in right now, and I find that there are indeed a core set of reports that for whatever reason, whether they're helping the people on the floor or not, somebody is requiring that they produce these reports, and they are of value maybe to management, but not so much on the plant floor. So that's where you have to talk to people at all different levels to figure that out.
One more thing where Dex and I are both, I think, headed is as soon as he gets this installed in his next plant, as soon as we're doing it now, we have plants comparing their capabilities against a plant on the other side of the planet. They've never been able to do that before. And boy, I tell you, it is changing attitudes and changing cultures and opening eyes right now.